Hi, I'm Kevin, and I'm living through the federal occupation in Minnesota. The true horrors are not being covered by the mainstream media without spin and bias. Independent journalists don't have the resources or bandwidth to cover the whole story. In order to fully understand the harm caused by this administration, these complex issues need to be broken down and examined as a system. This is Occupation Breakdown. I'm honored to introduce our first guest. She comes newly elected to the Minnesota State Senate. After serving one term in the House, she jumped in the special election last summer and clinched her win with over 60% of the vote, representing the 47th district covering Woodbury, Maplewood, and parts of both Washington and Ramsey County. Please welcome my representative, fellow Woodbury resident and mother, Senator Amanda Hemmingsen Jaeger.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat tonight.
How are you doing today?
Doing well. We are closing in on the first week of session getting done, and it's been a lot, but it's also been very exciting.
It's absolutely an honor to have you here today. I actually met you when you were out canvassing in the summer. I don't know if you actually remember that, but you came outside my house, and actually it was right after the Hortman's, assassination. And we had a very heartfelt conversation about me being just absolutely just honored and appreciative of your courage and everything that you're doing to stand up and be a part of this government, despite all the horrible, scary things going on. So it's an honor to have seen you elected and then also to be sitting with you here today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
The state of Minnesota has seen a recent surge of over 3,000 ICE and DHS agents. This started in November with Operation Metro Surge. The amount of agents started ramping up to about 1,000 by New Year's, and then Renee Good was murdered. Another 2,000 agents were sent to the Twin Cities, and that led to the most oppressive level of occupation we've ever seen in Minnesota. Although ICE agents have been pulled out in a supposed drawdown, we have yet to see any of those realities on the street. The effects of this incursion will last for decades, if not generations. And let me be clear on who this affects, because I think this is completely misunderstood. Most people say if you're here legally and you have nothing to worry about, but that completely disregards the fact that the Supreme Court has allowed agents to discriminate based on skin color, accent, clothing, suspected country of origin, things that are traditionally constitutionally protected in this country. That means this affects all non-white passing people, anyone with an accent, and really whomever they decide. If due process is gone for immigrants, it's gone for all of us. This level of fear brought into the community has instituted a de facto economic blockade on the communities. These are the building blocks on the path to a de jure apartheid society. Agents have been stalking grocery stores, pharmacies, daycares, schools, bus stops, restaurants, courthouses, government service centers, and basically anywhere needed to sustain life. I have a hard time leaving my house without seeing an ICE vehicle. Employers have seen workers too afraid to leave their houses. Some employers have been graceful, but most jobs won't allow you to keep a job if you don't show up. Some owners were too afraid to open and have remained closed. They often have to survive off of donations or make the compromise between security and just shutting down. Local employers have been short-staffed and unable to keep up their business. Those employees, they need to pay rent, buy groceries, and pay bills just like everyone else. So what happens to them? Families have been surviving locked up in their homes, only leaving in absolute emergencies or to make income. If leaving, they must have a passport and documentation on them because wrongful detainment is so common. People detained then get released when they are proven here as legally. In some cases, people are still deported despite their legal status. In other cases, they are sent to detention centers in Texas or Montana. Once proven innocent, they are released there with no phone, wallet, or any way to get home. They have to pay out of pocket to get back. In Minnesota, they're released in winter conditions at Whipple with no jackets and no way to get home. Thank God for groups like Haven Watch that popped up to save detainees. These families have been surviving off the generosity of their neighbors and community members. They've been delivering groceries, running errands for people, and providing safety escorts. At first, the need was overwhelming, but the world came to our aid with generosity. Fast forward to today with the drawdown, the attention fatigue has thoroughly set in, and the world is on to the next story. People here still have to pay rent and major bills coming up, though. So while some are continuing to survive on generosity, the wells are drying up, and people need serious long-term relief. These volunteers have been giving every ounce of energy, money, and resources to fight this, all while prices are skyrocketing just in general. Life is the least affordable it's ever been. ICE is operating on a $170 billion budget for 4 years. When we are maxed out and ready to give up at the end of each day, they get to stay in our hotels and enjoy per diem at our restaurants. So, what's the long-term answer to this? I brought Senator Hemmingsen Jaeger on to discuss potential solutions. Senator, I looked at your website and your platform. It was about fixing the broken healthcare system, affordable childcare, and the comprehensive ecosystem mindset, which sounds awesome, by the way. Did you ever imagine that this would be the first issue you'd address in your Senate when you first ran for elected office?
No, never. And I think you highlighted that stark contrast so eloquently. And that was just back in the summer, was thinking about how people can afford healthcare, how they can afford childcare and afford their groceries. And now we're in this time when our own federal government is sending masked people against their own people to abduct them, kidnap them, no probable cause, just snatching people off the street. And it's just shocked at how many constitutional rights are being violated. I mean, right to free speech, Fourth Amendment searches and seizures. I think I heard countless. I mean, even the Second Amendment, Alex Preddy, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's just shocking to me. And I think when I sit back and think about it, it's just I can't help but think like how we got here. To stop myself from going down that spiral, I think about what are my neighbors doing? What's our community doing? And what do I need to do to make sure that we don't let this happen again, that we respond to our communities that we need to, and that we are providing the resources and the outlets that we need to recover from all of this. Because, like you just said, this is going to be generational trauma into some communities that have already been so traumatized.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, is there anything there that you think I missed? Because every time I talk about this with people, obviously this is just me thinking from my own mindset. You obviously have constituents and other people reaching out to you. Are there any examples of kind of extra things that I maybe missed there that are, just extra layers to this?
I mean, I think your summary was fantastic. I mean, the whole fact that people are being expected to leave their homes with their papers and prove that they're here legally. We have lived experiences, people telling their stories about they were just detained or pulled over because they have an accent or because they look black or brown. But they're not stopping there. They're going after constitutional observers. We have at least 2 examples of, white people in Woodbury just doing their constitutional observing, their constitutional right to do it, being detained. We've had experiences of people needing very delicate medical attention. There's one I can think of in Woodbury, again, where a man was detained, legs in shackles. He had a rare genetic skin disorder and was not receiving the medical treatment that he needed. We just heard of a person coming up from Rochester who was being denied their cancer treatment. Like, these are life and death situations. We didn't even talk about the hundreds of kids that we don't know where they are because they were taken with their families. We heard about the little boy with the Spider-Man backpack and the bunny hat. That's just one example. And that is what is just so, it makes me angry that, like, this is where we are as a country. But at the same time, I get so much hope because I look around at what our neighbors are doing. We have people that are patrolling around, just checking out neighborhoods and making sure their neighbors are safe. We have people who are donating their time, their money to get food, to get diapers, to get other types of mutual aid out. People are just being around the schools and bus stops to make sure our kids are safe, and just this extra like vigilance. I feel everybody's got a whistle with them now. Volunteering at food shelves, there's pop-up protests I see in Woodbury, which is so inspiring. The amount of interest in our precinct caucuses. So just this hunger to now get involved into the process and the system to make sure that like our voices are the ones being heard has been so inspiring. And as an elected official, as a senator now, I I really take that trust that the community puts into me, and I really view it as a responsibility to make sure that those voices are carried at the Capitol. And, a week in, the Senate DFL is already off and running, and I've been being swept right up into it, jumping in feet first to make sure that, I'm standing up and standing for South Maplewood and Woodbury.
So, and I think of all these. This is just something I thought right now, and I think of all the times of great upheaval, and we get this big momentum, we get the wind in our sails going, and a lot of times, obviously, I don't think there is any time where the Republicans aren't standing up and being a blockade. So I don't think that it's even worth talking about. But how do we keep people on our own side from poo-pooing this and telling us to quiet down and, oh no, we need to wait for gradual change and things like that? What do you say to help keep people focused, not only but also keep your fellow coworkers also from doing that? Like, what do we do to keep them accountable as well?
Yeah, from what I've seen from my colleagues, we are all united into this, and we are all very much, there is no, well, it'll be okay if we just, just be patient. I think the fact that this has been going on for months now, for weeks now, we keep reminding ourselves this is not normal. This is not
Hmm.
normal. Like, put, again, watching out for bus stops, bringing food to neighbors because they're too scared to leave their house. Like, these things are not normal, and that is what keeps us strong, and that is, I think, what keeps us united, and that's what keeps us fighting. So we're being creative. I think given when you deal with a, a governmental agency, you're supposed to rely on laws. You're supposed to be able to go back on the Constitution, and our courts are not able to keep up, or our courts are staying silent. And that pushes us into a space where we need to be creative. How do we confront an organization, an agency that doesn't follow their own laws? And I think that's what we're really trying to do. That's what my colleagues and I are doing. And, that's what I've been telling people all along since this has started happening too, is we need to be creative. And that's what I'm seeing people doing. And I have yet to see any drawdown myself. My signal chats are still just as active as they were. Um, I'm concerned that being on the border community of Woodbury, that they may have moved out of a couple hotels, but my fear is, and what I'm starting to see from people in the community, is they're just moving across the river. So they're not really drawing down or decreasing any of this
Yeah.
activity.
They're using a border to artificially I mean, and on paper, yeah, they've left the state of Minnesota. But yeah, I know people in Hudson and, you know, out in Wisconsin, and it's been poured through there. So yeah, there is no drawdown. That's great to hear, I guess, about your colleagues and that the tides have really changed in the Minnesota Capitol and everything. I guess yeah, we just really have to work on Washington then and the colleagues there as well. So,
Yeah.
and from funding the ICE in the future, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I will say, keeping in touch with Representative McCollum, keeping in touch with Senators Klobuchar and Smith, those offices have been incredibly helpful at keeping us posted on what's happening in Washington. They've been amazing and responsive anytime we get a phone call of a citizen being detained. We have
Mhm.
avenues and a way to get a hold of them to get them out of there as soon as possible. And, they need our help staying strong too. We sometimes think that things are a mess here, but things are even messier in Washington. And
Oh, I get it. Yeah.
I've been impressed with, our reps Morrison, McCollum, Omar. and Craig and Klobuchar and Smith in the Senate, like just really standing strong and standing up for Minnesotans.
This is the Washington County Board meeting from February 17th. So this is from the other day. This clip is about 7 minutes long, but it's, I don't want to use the word good because it's awful, like the contents of it, but the person did such a great job of capturing the essence of what's truly going on here.
All right, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Bree Stelmack Maffey. I'm here as a neighbor, a homeowner, and president of the Cimmaron Residents Association. Right now, we have 50 plus families that are still locked in their homes. They're not able to be here today, so I am here to represent our Latino community that lives in Cimmaron. Cimmaron is a blue-collared manufactured home community where roughly half of our residents are Latino. All of them are hardworking people who contribute to this county every single day. Since November, our community has been living under a level of fear that no community in America should ever have to experience. On Christmas Eve, I watched with my own eyes men in masks sitting in a vehicle with tinted windows, out-of-state plates, parked outside a home in my neighborhood. They were recording, waiting, and watching. They followed a woman and her 3 children out of their house. The woman was abducted less than half a mile away going to Walmart for groceries. I'm not sure what happened to her children. That was the beginning of what has now become a daily terror in Cimmaron. On a daily basis, our community has experienced low-flying drones over our homes, multiple ICE agents patrolling, intimidating the community, brown people in the community being followed and in some case chased, masked individuals in unmarked vehicles waiting and recording houses, masked and armed agents at bus stops. This has become a daily occurrence and it is still happening. It happened on Monday. ICE agents are going door to door, banging on doors as early as 6 a.m. on Saturday mornings. Masked people are looking through windows and taking pictures after hours. Racial profiling of American citizens simply because they have brown skin. The worst example I saw that I actually can barely talk about was my 15-year-old neighbor getting off the school bus. She was boxed in by 4 agents with masks and weapons. She was asked to show her ID. I believe in this country at 15 years old, a U.S. citizen isn't required to have a passport when she goes to school. This was truly the moment I realized that our society was completely in the gutter. Since Christmas Eve, our neighborhood has been living in fear due to constant ICE intimidation and harassment. As a result, like I mentioned, 50 to 60 families that I'm aware of have essentially been confined to their homes for weeks. Parents have been detained, household contributors and breadwinners have disappeared. People have lost jobs simply because they were too afraid to walk out of their front door. One of the most heartbreaking stories I've heard was from a mother whose young son is in hospice care. He was nearing the end of his life. At the end of ICE presence in hospitals and in our community, she had to question whether leaving her home to seek care or pick up medication for her son would put her family in danger. No mother in America should have to weigh her dying child's care against her safety from her own government. This is truly an economic and humanitarian crisis. Families that relied on 2 incomes are now down to 1 or none. People who proudly never missed a day of work have been fired. Teenagers are working 2 jobs to keep the lights on in their house. Children are missing school. Families are behind on rent, utilities, and mortgages through no fault of their own. To make a challenging situation even worse, our manufactured home park is managed by an out-of-state equity firm with a long history of predatory practices. They have been successfully targeting and manipulating the Hispanic community in Cimmaron for years. They have already begun reminding vulnerable families in these situations, some less than 2 weeks late on their rent, that eviction filings are coming through multiple phone calls. These families are at real risk of losing not just their income, but their homes. Confirmed ICE vehicles are frequently parked at our community office, often daily. Residents have seen and heard our park manager providing addresses and suggesting that certain residents be deported. Threats of ICE from our park manager are nothing new. It's a fear tactic often used against our vulnerable Hispanic community. Peaceful constitutional observers exercising our First Amendment rights, like myself, were recorded by management and maintenance workers, told we could not have whistles to alert neighbors, and we even had the police called on us by our own management during an unlawful encounter. Clergy members from our community who attempted to pay residents rent with checks were turned away at the community office. Their payments were denied. This is not just immoral, it is illegal. Please let this sink in. The very management company entrusted with overseeing our housing has been working hand in hand with federal immigration enforcement while continuing a long history of predatory behavior towards our Hispanic neighbors. We cannot allow a wave of homelessness to follow a wave of unlawful enforcement by our government. Local nonprofits, churches, and generous neighbors have stepped up to provide food, water, and basic necessities to these families. But charity cannot rebuild financial stability. Charity cannot replace lost income. Charity cannot erase weeks of missed paychecks and unpaid bills that are piling up. This is where I see you coming in. These families need emergency financial assistance for back rent, utilities, and mortgages. They need eviction protections while they stabilize. They need job placement support and access to mental health care to recover from the trauma their children are carrying. They need time, they need stability, they need to rebuild trust in institutions that have failed them. And beyond the ICE crisis, we also need your ongoing involvement in addressing the predatory property management practices in manufactured home communities. We own our homes. We deserve fair, safe, and dignified living conditions and treatment. We deserve management that doesn't weaponize fear against us. Commissioners, I'm asking you humbly but urgently, please, I know you're going to Washington, D.C., give 110% effort in every way. Please fight for resources, fight for protection, stay present, stay engaged. I notice today's meeting agenda is many pages long, but please don't let Cimmaron fade from your agenda once the headlines move on. Please prioritize and put rebuilding our community at the top of your agenda until the pieces are put back together. I know you didn't create this crisis, but you have the power to help repair it. Cimmaron residents are not asking for handouts. They're asking for a bridge, a chance to get back to where they were 11 weeks ago. They want to work. They want to pay their own bills. They want their children to feel safe again. With that said, they're also scared, they're hurting, and they're overwhelmed right now. My neighbors are good people. Please fight for them at the county level and in Washington. Help us prevent further long-term displacement and generational harm. Help these hardworking families rebuild before this temporary crisis becomes permanent devastation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Before I let you talk, I guess the two things I'm thinking of. In Chicago, there is a raid on an apartment complex. I don't know if you remember that one where they took a Black Hawk helicopter. It was Greg Bovino's crew. They took it off of Navy Pier at about midnight. They landed on top of the apartment complex and they cleared out the entire building, pulled all the people out in the middle of the night, in the underwear, naked, pajamas. They took kids, they zip tied them, and they put them in the back of like a U-Haul truck until everybody was, cleared as a legal resident, basically. And after the fact, it recently came out that the property owner there actually was a, Wisconsin MAGA Republican and someone who actually went out of his way and basically tipped off ICE and worked with them to try to remove Venezuelans who he claimed were from Tren de Aragua from the premises, basically. So ICE acted on his behalf. One of the things going on was that he had recently bought the building and there was horrible conditions there and he refused to do the work to fix it up. So the people complaining were the people that, were obviously probably likely targeted in this situation. Secondly, and I think about this person who's working with the government and actively standing up against these people. And I said it before, and I don't say these terms lightly, but we have Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, former apartheid children, that are trying to bring this back to America. And it really is stark when you hear things like that. But anyways, what do you think about that? There's so much to unpack there, but I'll let you just kind of talk about it.
Yeah, I tried to take notes. So first of all, I just want to, thank that woman, how she encapsulated everything so succinctly and just reminding us all of the humanity in this. Like that these bullying tactics, these intimidating tactics that are designed and intentionally meant to terrorize people. She used the word harassment. That's exactly what it is. And I think that is what makes these just so disgusting and so immoral, when you are intentionally causing terror and fear by pounding on doors, by stalking kids coming out of their bus, constantly looping. I've heard a lot about Cimmaron and just constantly looping. I mean, that level of fear, imagine what that does to like your cortisol levels and your stress hormones. Like that is not that's not healthy. And again, this is not right. This is not normal. And I think, when we hear these heartbreaking stories, that story about a mom having to choose between medication for her son and maybe not even being there at all for her son, that's an example of choices that no one should ever have to make. And I think when I think about, and this is where I have found my role in the Senate, in the House, in the community is sometimes it's so easy to say, well, we're in the suburbs. This is the suburbs. We're a quiet community. We want everybody to live their full, healthy, thriving lives. That's over in Minneapolis. It's not. This is happening here in our neighborhoods, in the suburbs. We just heard that woman talk about what's happening in Cimarron. And we hear all the time about people seeing ice. You just mentioned it yourself, like it's in your own neighborhood. I've seen it on different streets in Woodbury. And I think, again, it's this intentional terrorizing that is the worst of it. And these are humans being we're talking about. These are our neighbors. These are kids. And that is the most shocking thing, I think, for me to try to understand too, is like, how can we do this to one another as humans? I also really appreciated when she was talking about she wasn't talking about solutions. She was talking about like what our community needs. And this is where I'm thinking about how we need to recover from this eviction protections, which I know the House and the Senate have been working on for years, working on tenant protections from eviction, protections from landlords, the job placements, the mental health, the trauma. And so when you brought up my comprehensive ecosystem mindset, like this is what we're talking about. I'm also thinking about the kids that are missing school. What's that doing to our opportunity gap that we were working so hard and we were making gains and now we are right back there? How are we going to get these kids caught up? How are we going to get, the trust in the institutions again? We have so much work to do and so much to recover, and none of this was our fault. This was all thrust upon us, and they have terrorized and left a mess. And you know, Minnesotans will come together. We'll clean up the mess, but it's a mess that we shouldn't have to clean up. But I know I have hope and I have faith in our neighbors, and do everything that I can every day during session to continue to tell the story, to continue to vote, and to continue to push, and just keep talking about this, because we're not out of the woods yet. We still have a long ways to go. Yeah. So when she mentioned the predatory practices of these out of state companies, also something we're looking at, because I think that is also contributing to our housing crisis and our affordability crisis. And again, where we think about why are we in this place, having these predatory landowning or tenant owning or building owning, any kind of these for-profit corporations, like, and if they're being predators and exploiting people who are just trying to have a roof over their head, to me, that is indicative of a system that is not working for the people. And that is what we need to be sure that we're focusing on and addressing, so that we do have systems that are working for the people. Let's wrap that.
Yeah. Yeah. Damn right. So on January 14th, we had the first city council meeting that was after the shooting of Renee Good. So in that meeting, you personally were able to put out something to the public, trying to garner support to come support you as well as other people, talking about the proposed detention center that was coming to Woodbury, and then also just a general ICE presence in town. So at that meeting, there was a press conference before that was great, the library across the way. And then also we came over and packed the absolute house. And I'm talking every single seat, all the standing room, and then the lobby behind, and then they had an additional overflow. We packed the entire building. And normally they only have 3 speakers there, but they had the people show up. They voted and allowed everybody to speak their minds for an hour. We were able to fit in every single speaker for about 3 minutes, and outside of one interesting person there was pretty unanimous consent on what was going on in our city, the clear, overwhelming narratives of racial profiling just over and over, the awful things happening to people. And then, the response from the city was, well, we can't really do anything. We hear you, but we can't really do anything, is kind of the gist that I felt. Kim Wilson just topped off the night and said that basically this whole thing is under the guise of public safety. And, I just want to say as a rhetorical question, public safety for whom? That one just really killed me. And the people taping in the room did everybody an injustice and turned the camera around. And the entire building emptied out after that. And there was about 15 people left in the building after that. Wish it was more documented, but I mean, if I have time, I'll go back and cover that again. So after that meeting, fast forward 2 weeks, they put out statements that happened after that in between saying that the people who own it, they're not going to sell it, and there's no other buildings that meet the specifications. So we think we got past it. So it seemed like the general public just went back to sleep and, was like, hey, we're good. And the next meeting came, and the only speaker was someone who said, there's a Frisbee golf course coming, and I'm worried about it being in my backyard. The juxtaposition between the 2 meetings was pretty stark. And then this meeting now, we have one person, and absolutely thank you so much for this gentleman for coming up. But this is the only speaker who came up here, and I just want to show you this interaction with the city here, and you could let the video speak for itself, but it feels very flippant to his concerns here. So I'm just going to roll the video here, and then we'll respond after.
I'm a resident of Woodbury for 36 years, and I'm here to follow up from the meeting that we had with you regarding the ICE detention center that you stopped, and we're so appreciative of that. I sent a follow-up email on February 1st to find out, is there any way to ban them or do something more permanent so that we can rest assured that it's not going to happen in the city? I know I hear on the news about the state of Washington banning these facilities, the state of Mississippi banning these facilities, Oklahoma. So I don't know if there's anything in the works to make it a more permanent solution and not just a one-off. And in addition to that, the facility, the Hero Center, if there's any restrictions or any power you have over that facility to help regulate what happens there as well. So I sent my email on the 1st. I got a response back that you all got the email. I don't know how long it takes to respond to that, but that was the reason for my coming here today.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just add that we have gotten hundreds of these responses, and most of the time we do have a staff member who reviews them. And for the most part, the comments that come in look like statements are being made, and we accept any statement that wants to come in. We don't always answer those. So if there was a very specific question and that we missed it, we'll go back. I think I'll just direct staff to go back and look at this particular one and see if there was a particular question that came out that needed a response. We'll double check that and then answer that. But just, I think for the record, for those that may be listening, I'm going to say very broadly, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but there is do a civics lesson. There's a thing called the supremacy clause that the federal government has in the U.S. Constitution. So it does limit some things we can do. There are cities that have put in things that maybe just been done to put something out there, but it may not have any legal standing in the long run. It's performative. Thank you. That's a good word to use. It's performative. So we have been aware of that. So as we have thought about all the actions we could take, that's under consideration as well. That said, more than anything, our staff works very, very hard to know the lay of the land in our community, know facilities that might be available, the land that may or may not be available, and has worked very hard to prevent this from coming. And we feel very good about where it stands.
Yeah, and we all appreciate that and understand that.
And I would just like to state that one of the things we did learn after the last meeting when we communicated this is that we did get written documentation from a contractor for the federal government that was looking at doing this work, that this is off the table. They have no interest any further in pursuing this. So based on that, we feel pretty confident. We keep hearing too about drawdowns that are occurring, and with more and more of that happening, there seems to be, from my perspective, no need for this whatsoever. So that I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to be saying anything else wrong, and I think we'll get back to you with a more detailed, specific answer.
Thank you.
So there's a couple of things there. I guess the first one I have is, what do you think about Steve Morris and Ann Burt doing anything performative? I mean, it seems like they're just like searching for a way to just be like, oh, there's nothing we could do, but what do you think about that?
So I can see how from their perspective, if it isn't completely 100% fleshed out and everything tied up neatly, that it could be perceived as performative. I would argue that as an elected official, it is your job and your duty to respond to your constituents. And when constituents come to you and they give creative solutions, because we're seeing other cities do this, we're seeing other cities do that, let's learn from each other. And one thing that, the city of Roseville put signs on all of their parks saying that these parks are city parks and are not to be used for federal government staging. You must have a permit to basically use our parking lot. I've had to talk to people that say, ICE is staging in my church. Like, what do I do? And it's like, that's private property. You can tell them to leave because they're trespassing. So like some of these things that you can do, you have the right to do. It's not performative. It's standing up for your community. It's responding to your community. When you have 500 to 600 people show up at a city council meeting, which I don't think has ever been done. It's unprecedented in the best way, demanding to be heard by city council. And even the statements, I will never forget at the end of that meeting, I was disappointed that I didn't hear personal elected official statements saying, I'm going to do this. I'm so glad that you came and we heard you. I heard you and we need to take action. What I did hear was, it's up to you now. You need to keep telling us. You need to keep your foot on the gas. You need to continue telling us and continue raising your voice. So I am so thrilled that they have gotten hundreds of emails and hundreds of phone calls. This is a community doing what the community needs to do to hold our elected officials accountable. As a state senator, that's how I know that something is important to my community, is by contacts, by emails, by phone calls, by letters, by postcards, by in-person visits, by Teams visits. Like, that is how I do my job, is I listen to my community and I respond. I represent them. So I would say, keep emailing them, keep calling them. The city staff has done amazing work. I had the opportunity to talk to them about what's been happening specifically with the detention center. But I think, as this gentleman pointed out, this goes beyond a detention center. And I think what he showed as an example too is we don't trust it. We don't trust the written word of the federal government official. Necessarily trust that the contractor is not going to get a really sweet deal and change their mind. We don't trust that the government will find another suitable building that maybe the specifications are a little bit different now. Like, they're changing and evolving their tactics. The community doesn't trust it. So, tangented a little bit, but I'm very proud of our city staff. They have done incredible work. When I talked to them, they were thinking creatively. They were thinking about, okay, so if we do this, how could they go around or think about it differently and do that? And then they went down that rabbit hole and like flushed it out and talked about it. But, you know, talked about, public safety. ICE isn't making our community more safe. We're hearing about cars being left in the middle of the street, people being drugged out of their homes, people being terrorized to stay inside. That's not making our community more safe. It's making it less safe. And like I said at the city council meeting, ICE is bad for business. It's bad for our neighborhood and it's bad for public safety. And we want them out. We want them out for good. So yeah, so I guess just overall, elected officials need to be held accountable, myself included. And that's why I take this job seriously. And there's an election coming up. I think at least 2 seats are up for city council. So
Honestly, we have other avenues to hold them accountable as well. There's a recall process if we're unhappy with our elected officials. If you have something, you want to talk about at the federal level that you'd hope to be done, that's up to you. But really, I guess my focus is from state level down. What were you hoping to do at the state level, county? What are you hoping to pressure the county to do potentially, and the cities as well? What are your thoughts on that? Do you have
yeah.
anything you've seen legislation pushed through this week even?
Yeah. So I just kind of want one comment about the federal level. This is again, it's another example of why we desperately need federal immigration reform. When we're hearing about people who are in the middle, they've been on an asylum for 15 years waiting for their asylum case to get through, and then they're getting picked up. When we have people who are doing everything they're supposed to do and they're showing up at the courthouse for their immigration proceedings and then they're snatched out of the courtroom, like we have issues with our immigration reform should be leaving people in limbo for that long of time and for it to be abused so quickly to get people out of the country for basically no due process and no just cause. And and my job there is to continue to elevate that to our federal delegation. We have more elections coming up, and these are the questions we can be asking of the candidates that are running for federal office. At the state level, bills are already flying. Bills are already getting introduced. I think it was my first bill I signed on to in the Senate was a bill to make a state law to mandate that if you're going to be transporting people you are detaining, they need to be done so in a legal vehicle. A vehicle with seat belts, a vehicle with car seats. You can't be just picked up and thrown into a van or thrown into a U-Haul. Like, this is like basic humanity that, like, again, it's common sense. Why do we have to make a law? This is why we have to make a law. So proud to have signed onto that bill. I have a plan to sign onto many more. The challenge and the trick in this, so what I miss about the House a little bit, the House, you can have 30 co-authors on it. The Senate, you can have 5. So there's like a little bit of competition to make sure you can get one of those 5 spots. But if my name is not on it, doesn't mean I'm not supporting it. I have said multiple times that if we expect our law enforcement to not wear masks, to have identification and badges, to have appropriately marked cars, to be behaving using constitutional rights and making sure people have their constitutional rights, then we should expect that of any entity coming into our state. So those are some of the really simple, straightforward bills that are being introduced in the legislature. So, all of those. And then just today, there was a press conference done by the Senate DFL that I was very honored to stand strong with my colleagues as they discussed a suite of bills that are going to be heard in the Judiciary Committee coming up. The first one, Majority Leader Murphy talked about was, again, I was a lifeguard in high school, and the fact that like this even has to be a thing, again, is just so demoralizing. But mandating that if there is harm done, that the officers or the agents, they must render medical aid. She told these stories of when Renee Good was shot, she was denied medical aid for 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Even though physicians and doctors came by and asked to just check her pulse, they were denied. Same with Alex Preddy. They denied medical care. So that's one of the bills. There's another one to make sure that our hospitals our schools, our churches, our safe spaces. Our Senator Dr. Elise Mann talked about armed masked people coming into patients' rooms. Like, imagine the terror. Like, these are people who are vulnerable, needing health care. That should be safe. Chair Aisha Gomez tonight on the House floor talked about kids being tear gassed at Roosevelt High School, and the schools aren't safe spaces. So that's another bill that I believe strongly in, that we need to just draw the line. And thinking back now, maybe these are performative, but you know what? They're important. It's important to put it down on paper. It's important that I put my name by it, because it's important to the community, and it shows where the line is. It shows that I want to protect our community and protect our kids and protect our most vulnerable. Yeah. So, and then I think another interesting bill, again, just being creative. The lawyers in the House and the Senate have basically crafted a state law that allows citizens the ability to sue federal agencies for harm done against them. You can do that for state officials, but you can't do it for federal. So, you know what? We're going to add them in there too. Because if you're intentionally causing harm and you feel that there's no immunity, that's a problem. So that we need to have consequences for these actions happening onto our Minnesotans. One other thing that I want to make sure to mention is the Senate was able to put together a subcommittee on the federal impact on Minnesotans and economic stability. And they have been meeting throughout the interim to just talk about, in general, what the federal government actions have been impacting Minnesotans. So it started, talking about Medicaid cuts, talking about SNAP cuts. And now it's really talked about how has ICE impacted our communities. My understanding is a lot of the education committees, the commerce committees, all of these types of committees that deal with different sectors of our communities and of Minnesota, they're talking about how ICE has impacted learning, how ICE has impacted schools. And it's just a really, I think, creative way to talk about these issues kind of in their own lane. But it also really highlights that the expansiveness of which we're talking about this just is indicative of how serious and how far-reaching this issue is.
Yeah. Did you see the St. Paul ordinance today that they passed, saying that agents can't be wearing masks and operating within St. Paul? Stuff like that. I feel like, I certainly understand the tough spot that it puts obviously our current police officers in, but definitely it is something that they can do. They are kicking them off city property. They have the ability to go tell them, and they go leave. So there are small wins there that they may seem performative, but it seems like there's inches that we do gain here and there. So I feel good about that. But also, the kicking them off city property is certainly another one. Pulling into my neighborhood and looking into the park that is literally right around the corner from me, and having an ICE vehicle sitting there staged with no plates. Yeah, it's pretty stark. And how many immigrant families live in my neighborhood and are just sitting right there, and good luck using the park. I mean, obviously it's pretty sub-zero at that point, but good Lord, people still use the parks out here in the winter. Plenty of stuff to do. So I just found that it just really hit home. So I guess I'm just trying to think of any other things at the local level that you have heard of cities doing. Is there anything else that you've thought of?
So in my discussions with our Woodbury Public Safety, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the impact on our local law enforcement too. This is eroding trust in our own local law enforcement, and they have really been trying hard to focus on de-escalation, to have our multicultural advisory committee involved in their policing policies and having a seat at the table. Really wanting to protect with, I think Chief Posel always says, courage and compassion. And this presence of these masked thugs coming into the community, it's eroding the trust in our own public safety. And that's not fair to our own, again, it's not fair to our own community. So I think when I've talked to public safety, they agree. These people should be identifiable. they had a really good idea that I'm going to look and see if we got a bill for it, but they need to accurately display the agency that they're a part of. You see these ICE agents going around with police. They're
Yeah.
not police. They are
No.
not sworn law enforcement. They are Custom and Border Patrol agents. They are Immigration Customs Enforcement agents. But when you come around with tactical gear with police, that's very confusing to the community. It's not fair, and it erodes trust in our own local law enforcement, which is not right. So I think there are some things we can do, as far as actions go, like call 911. They are there to help the community. If you see people and that's the thing too. When I think about masked people who are not identifiable, if we didn't know they were ICE, we would be calling 911 saying there is a masked person trying to break into my neighbor's house. I'm worried about people in domestic abuse. People now copycatting these agents to
Mhm.
do their own nefarious things to cause harm. So that is where my concern is. I've been assured that if people see stuff that they should always feel comfortable calling 911. I don't know how the community feels about that because there's a lot of trust gone now.
It's almost like the police now they get to decide who they apply the laws to. So let's just say, for example, we had some young people of color that were in town wearing masks and doing God knows what. I'm sure they'd apply the laws to those people if they want to. But when it comes to other people, we're just going to back off today. And I don't know. I just struggle to
Yeah.
allow that to be the new norm, you know?
It's the inconsistency that is confusing and troubling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty much what I had prepared for today. Honored having you here. This was just a absolutely wonderful conversation. I would love to have you back in the future just to talk about your platform, and hopefully we could do that at a time when this isn't the pressing reality. So I look forward to that in the future, as well as if you have other, fellow elected representatives that are interested in speaking as well. I would love to have them on here and continue pushing this message forward for our state and the other people that don't have the ability to go out and get outside of their house and shout at the rooftops and spread this message here. Outside of that, do you have any final thoughts for the day before we go?
Yeah, just thank you so much for inviting me on and to have a conversation and to just have another way to reach people. Thank you. Thank you for using your talents and your resources to keep this message going and to stand up for our community. Big thank you to everybody out there. We are all in this together. We're going to get through this together. And I have seen so many cool examples of people who were never really, they don't like to get political, but they want to help their neighbors. And so everybody's thinking of really cool, creative ways to step in and to make their voice heard, to engage in their community, to just think of ways to help. And I think that is what Minnesota is all about. That's what our community is all about. And I believe that we'll get through this all and we'll get through this together. And I think we're being an example for other states. There are other states looking at what Minnesota is doing and they're learning, and we're going to get through this. It's going to be hard and long, but we're getting through it. So thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. And for all of our viewers here, I'll put the links at everything in the description here, but where can they find you, social media and different things for your platform?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. If you go to the Senate webpage, you can see a profile of mine. You can get in touch with the email form. My LA's information is on there. It's really nice. I have so in the House, you have one legislative assistant for every like 2 to 3 House reps. I have one legislative assistant all to myself, and she is amazing. But sometimes it's a faster to her than it is to get to me because I'm running around, and she can be like, hey, ping this. So very grateful for that. But you can also sign up to my newsletter too. So you can keep track of what I'm doing and making sure I'm doing my job representing you at the Capitol.
And for myself on Facebook as an individual, I'm going by Dissent Dad. So it's at Dissent Dad. I'm primarily on Facebook. I'm basically trying to aggregate a lot of the local media, independent, mainstream, all those things, and try to capture all those stories in one place, as well as putting in my own reels and stuff, and then actually doing coverage on the ground. So I've been trying to go to Whipple, and I mean that's a whole conversation itself, but just everything about that building. I've been covering the native camp outside of Whipple actually as well. I've also covered the trial for the church protests and was just at the arraignment for Georgia Fort and Trayon Cruz the other day. So I've been trying to just kind of work my way around town and try to bring more light to what's going on within the cities. Obviously there's a lot going on within the Twin Cities that is very well focused on and people are covering. But I think the main reason why I did what I did in starting this was to make sure that we did get a voice on, in the suburbs and the outskirts of town where people, like you said earlier, they just say Minneapolis, what unrest, there's nothing going on here. And it's like, no, your neighbors are getting abducted. So I think that was my big thing. So yeah, I'm primarily on Facebook at Dissent Dad, on Instagram, on Substack, and YouTube. And then also for this platform, I'm basically trying to break down the effects of the occupation just firsthand and doing it with firsthand accounts. And so thank you, Senator, for being my first guest and breaking down kind of what you're doing and the economic impacts of it. And then, yeah, this will be YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Substack. So that's it's at Occupation Breakdown on all of those platforms. Shout out to our sponsor. This is all done by myself. I'm not making a dime off of this. I don't have a sponsor. I don't have anything. I'm going to assume based off a lot of the topics that I'm doing, it's going to be pretty hard to get monetized. So I'm also taking donations just personally to try to continue this mission, get new equipment, and be more efficient at getting the news and the word out there. So I'm also on, it's Buy Me a Coffee at Dissent Dad. So thank you very much. I appreciate everybody. Thank you so much for being my guest today. Everybody have a wonderful day, and we'll see you later.